We have a lot to cover, but to start, we're going to show you a little bit of a highlight reel of some of the work that we've been doing and why it matters, right? So,
We'll call it sizzle.
yeah, we'll call it sizzle. Yeah, a little bit of sizzle. But it's like science. Is science sizzly? Okay.
Be sizzling.
Okay. Says the science guy. Yeah, for sure. Don't leave us out.
We call it sexy stuff in science.
Yeah. This is sexy sizzle.
Yeah.
So let's hit it.
Tech is not a word you would ever have thought you'd be associating with mixed martial arts. It's a game of inches that we play, and we as fighters are constantly looking for anything to give us any type of advantage.
It's the little things. It starts with sleep, nutrition, hydration. Those are like 3 basic things.
A lot of pro athletes, the greats, when they retire, they talk about, how they've stayed and played so long.
Every person, player, team, coach, we're all looking for that secret weapon that nobody else has.
Pro clubs in all sports are investing heavily in competitive advantages that are technology driven, that are physical health science driven, that are mental health science driven. Aries Tech provides us one more opportunity, one more tool in the arsenal of what we're doing when nobody's watching so that we can be better when everybody is.
How do we continue to move humanity forward through innovation, through technology, while still remaining safe? I look at as Aries as that solution to this problem that we created through innovation. If you look at our research, all the stuff that we've done, we knew that we could demonstrate the effect in real time that our product works, which then led me to Dr. Dogris here. His ability to look at how the brain's functioning, how the heart's functioning, the connection to this external radiation from the cell phones, from your wireless devices, how it actually interacts with the body, and then when you introduce our product to make that all go away is pretty remarkable.
We've tested a lot of people on the road, and we keep on making the same observation. The thing about the Aries is that there's a mitigation variable here, and we keep on seeing that again and again, which is really, from a scientific perspective, it's pretty interesting.
Hey guys, my name is Tim Welch. I'm the owner and head coach here at the Red Hawk Academy in Peoria, Arizona.
Yo, what up guys? Corey Sandman Sandhagen here.
Hey everyone, NASCAR driver Chad Fincham.
We're here with Aries Tech to do some tests.
So now we're going to do a quantitative EEG, which is a recording of the brain.
The resolution of an EEG is actually higher than that of an MRI. All right, so we're going to do the first test here, okay? We're doing a pure recording of the brain, and we'll see your brainwave responses to the cell phone. So now we're going to do condition number 3, and this time we have the Aries Tech device present, and we can compare that to the baseline so we can see the difference between the two.
Normal heart rate variability is about 50 milliseconds, all right? You come in at 69.68. So great, nice healthy heart. It's exactly where you want to be.
Sweet.
Okay. And this is eyes open with no protection on the phone. So then we look at what happened when you had Aries on the phone. And that's Aries Tech on the phone. From baseline to the Aries here, your heart rate variability went up to 87.71, which is really great. That's a significant increase.
That's crazy.
That's a mic drop. That's like...
So seeing that, like you're learning about it for the first time, but even just start with heart rate variability. What was the change between the two?
He went from 69.68 milliseconds to 87.71.
Which is significant.
That's a very, you don't have to crunch the stats there.
So when you see that, like, what's your response to that?
I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome seeing it and hearing it from the doctor and seeing it firsthand. It's pretty awesome.
So to see that has that type of effect, is it shocking?
Yeah, definitely unexpected. Definitely unexpected, but I mean, pretty much proves it right there.
This is your heart data. This orange, yellow, and green bar, these are all 3 different speeds of the heart. The yellow bar represents sympathetic activation, or your get up and go activation.
Okay.
The green bar represents parasympathetic activation. So it's kind of like, being able to relax and lay back in the hammock. So this is your baseline on the left here, and this is what you look like after you have exposure with a phone with no Aries tech on it.
Oh, wow.
And when you have a high VLF and a high LF together, that's anxiety.
Really?
The HF is the parasympathetic. That's what kind of mitigates it and relaxes you. When you have Aries tech on the phone, this parasympathetic
Okay.
up. You get a more balanced autonomic nervous system, and your heart rate variability starts to increase again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what you look like in baseline, right? And that's what you look like when you have Aries tech on.
My gosh, look at that. I mean, it's doubled over baseline.
Yeah, let's put up number.
I was gonna say, if you put 2 and 3 side by side.
Yes, you got it. All right, so let's do that. Boom.
No, wait, look at that. Parasympathetic tripled.
You're an athlete, and being an athlete, your heart is tuned and it's designed to stretch. Well, look at that.
Whoa,
So
that's crazy.
That's what your heart does when you're exposed to a cell phone.
What?
Let's take a look at what you did when you had a phone with Aries tech. Here we go, and boom.
So about
That's
even.
what happens when you got Aries tech on the phone. So it brought it down, and it brought it down to a more balanced state. Now we're going to look at your EEG data. Delta is what you produce when you sleep.
Okay.
Theta is what you produce when you're meditating, relaxing, waking up in the morning, half awake, half asleep. That's theta.
Okay.
Alpha is your laying in the hammock kind of rhythm. Look what happened in alpha. Alpha takes a sharp increase in amplitude. It goes up. We see the same thing in alpha 1 and alpha 2. This is pretty strong.
Yeah.
Now this would again match what your heart was doing, making you more sympathetically activated.
The fight or flight was way higher when my phone is next to my face versus when it wasn't, so that was cool.
So let's look at what you look like when you have a protection on the phone.
Okay.
Versus your baseline. So we have a pretty
Nice.
significant presentation that changes here.
Yeah.
Wow. So your theta power comes up, alpha power comes up, and it looks like your betas return.
Yeah.
Starting to return here. See that?
Whoa, that's interesting.
When you had a phone up to your head and you did not have any Aries protection. Okay, so we got the pre and then the first exposure here.
Okay.
And then this is baseline and the phone with Aries protection. And what appears to have happened here is that you did have a significant reduction in delta and theta activity in your frontal lobe. We look at beta to beta, and you look at the post here. Now, that amount of beta goes down significantly.
Yeah, look at how much more blue that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like double.
Yeah, your brain relaxed there. For sure. This is an FDA cleared device that was put on your head that's designed to measure the brain.
Yeah.
And when you actually get numbers like this, they're real numbers.
Data doesn't lie. That's why I love it. I mean, being in the racing space, I mean, cars is data. I mean, my whole life is centered around data, but it's just like car data. So this is all new to me, but I mean, I am floored by the results. I mean, because if you look at baseline to the exposure, without the Aries, look how much more it lit up, right? Like it lit up a lot. But then the exposure with the Aries improved probably by at least 30 or 40% over baseline.
Now, what we see here is you got some right frontal delta here in your baseline. But what is really telling here is that the overall power of delta after exposure to the phone dropped. The brain creates a lot of different frequencies all at the same time. delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta, and gamma. Delta is what you produce when you sleep. And then you can see there's a bit of left frontal activation here that is more than your baseline. That would create fogginess, okay? And it's not unusual for us to see this. You know, typically when somebody gets exposed to high energy like that and the body's not used to it, then it'll make you sleepy. You know?
When you're doing these tests and stuff, do you see more of a change when it's 5G and the more powerful the phone is, the more powerful everything, you see more of a change?
Yeah. The more power is definitely going to cause more of a response biologically. And also your level of health, you're in good shape. You take care of yourself, you know, you eat right. You take somebody who doesn't do that thing, they won't be able to sustain that type of exposure for long. This theta changed on your right side here, and we saw more frontal theta up here. Alpha changed, more left frontal alpha appeared. And what I can tell you is that it can create a lot of different problems, such as depression, anxiety, brain fog, attention deficit, stuff like that. This right here is very telling. So high beta and gamma are really fast frequencies in the brain. If you see on the right here, see this red on your right temporal lobe, that's where you're holding the phone, and it caused more activation in high beta and gamma in your right temporal lobe.
Thanks.
When you had Aries Tech on the phone, you did look better. This is no protection with protection. Let's see what happens in the betas. There you go. That tells the story all together there. From pre to post, that went down quite a bit. That's a pretty big change.
You see the comments, you see people talking about it, but if you can just prove it like this, then it changes it. I mean, especially for athletes, it's an absolute game changer. It makes me definitely want to get the Aries Tech for all my family.
What I can tell you is that phone slowed you down. So when you walked in the room, 512 milliseconds, okay? Now that's an above average response time, that's fast, okay? But as soon as you put the Aries device on the phone, you even got faster.
Oh yeah, that's pretty significant looking.
And when you look at this from baseline to your third test, that's significantly faster.
Cool.
That's about 40 milliseconds faster.
Dang. I'll have to sew in the Aries Tech into my shorts or something since we don't have clothes on, yeah. but then my opponent would get it too if he got close enough. Getting the results, obviously the doctor said that my reaction time is less when I am having the phone by my ear and just kind of EMF just in general. So I definitely see it as a way to optimize my performance.
You know, in NASCAR racing, you're racing. It's all about speed. The whole sport is built around speed. How fast can you go, and can you do it for the duration of the race? 1/10 of a second on a racetrack can mean the difference between first and maybe last in some cases. You know, fractions of a second is so crucial. And like with Aries Tech, modulating the negative impacts of EMF, better focus, clarity, the whole 9 yards, enabled me to have faster response time, which led to faster recoveries when I'm doing my training and working out, both on and off the track. You know, one thing that we do as NASCAR drivers that we go through with our training processes is, you know, you don't necessarily have to go and lift up a ton of weight to drive a NASCAR car, but you have to have the endurance. And so you have to do a lot of endurance training, cardio. If you're not getting good sleep at night, that was what I was battling with. I was waking up 3 and 4 times a night after my training sessions, and then I would go into the next day and I'd already be tired and fatigued before I even got started.
Actually, before the last fight, I thought about like how I could get an Aries thing on me somehow, but I obviously can't go in with a necklace. I thought about putting it in my cup maybe. I thought that would maybe be a good idea.
Once I found Aries Tech, one of the major things that I seen almost right away was as soon as I set that Aries Tech device down, you know, on my nightstand and then put one on my phone, like I said, almost immediately I could see the impacts. I wasn't waking up as much in the middle of the night. You know, I went from 3 or 4 times every night to maybe once or twice, depending on how much I drank, if I needed to go to the bathroom for hydration. But I mean, really, it's better sleep. I wear the Whoop 5.0. I was tracking, you know, how much REM sleep was I getting? REM sleep is so important for recovery, and I was probably doubling the REM sleep I was getting. So I was waking up each day feeling more refreshed and ready to tackle the next day.
I have the Aries Tech everywhere in my house, which is awesome. It just kind of feels good knowing that there's like something preventing all of this like EMF waves that are going on, and those things are just really unnatural. Like electricity and shit was not like a part of civilization for, most of humanity. So so it feels really cool that there's something that's like counteracting the modern day like stuff that we got going on.
Teams that win and succeed sometimes do the unthinkable. Everyone in pro sports, NASCAR, NFL, hockey, it does not matter. If you're in pro sports, every person, player, team, coach, owner, we're all looking for that secret weapon, that extra edge that nobody else has. And for me and my team and what we're doing, Aries was that solution for us and myself.
My name is Nick Dogris. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Neurofield Incorporated. I've been in the neuroscience field for, I don't even want to say it out loud anymore, but like 35 years. Started with EEG analysis back in the late 1980s. My specialization in neuroscience is to look at the brain and write algorithms that, I'm a computer nerd that can sit down and look at the brain and come up with these models to help predict what the brain's going to do. So these predictive models are, we've been doing them for years. And we've taken them and used them to help people to rehabilitate from different kinds of injuries, from head injuries, concussions, people with depression, anxiety, ADHD, different kinds of disorders. And over the years, we started with neurofeedback technologies, and then we created a whole bunch of neurostimulation modalities to help to balance the brain. Well, so in 2001 or 2002, my eldest son was born with a brain injury. And I knew that at that time, I had been in the field long enough to know that he was going to need a specialized kind of help to help him to rehabilitate. So I developed an electromagnetic stimulator to be able to stimulate a baby, right? And this is a pretty cool piece of technology, but something that was really, really gentle, but could actually increase blood flow in the brain. And when the brain gets that kind of blood flow, it can heal itself. It's the best doctor in the room. So we figured out how to do that, and the kid got better. And so we started looking at, what's good EMF and what's bad EMF. We took a lot of time establishing that. That was one of the things I think that led you to me, which was, I spent, the last 20 years looking at EMF technologies and, what's gonna impact you negatively. And yeah, the phone is just one of many different kinds of EMF that are out there that have a potential negative impact on the body, on the brain, on your electrical fields. Your heart can be measured from up to 6 meters away from your body. And you can actually get, you can measure that electromagnetic field that's created by the heart. Now, when that happens, you can have something else in the room that's going to interact with it. And the heart's going to inform the brain about what's going on. If there's danger around you, if there's different kinds of hostile energies around you, your heart's going to pick it up first. You ever walk into a room where something bad happened and you may not know it, but you'll feel it? That is not a just kind of something that just magically happens. That's real energy that sticks around, right? And so, these are things that we need to think about. Creating environments that create health and optimal functioning in people. When I learned about Aries Tech, I thought, is this possible? I spent many years being a professional musician, and I still haven't shook the 70s look. It's me. But I played pro rock and roll. I toured with big bands. And with music, it's really interesting, right? It's going to impact the body. I look at the brain as a musical instrument. How do you tune that? And so, when you make a sound studio, a professional recording studio, you're going to set up something like this. If you look on those walls, those are dampeners, right? They're going to absorb sound, keep it from bouncing in different ways, right? We know that different kinds of surfaces will absorb sound or diffract sound, right? Well, the same thing can happen with EMF energies in a room. Repeaters are repeating at really high frequency rates, and they're using these really fast communications that are square waves, and the body doesn't create square waves. So when that hits your body, the body doesn't know what to do with that. And what it's slowly starting to do to our populations, it's starting to erode our magnetic fields in our body. And it's a real big concern. When we look at this, we're all part of this information age. We're at the infancy of it, the beginning of this thing. And, we got to get smart about how to actually mitigate these effects and stay healthy. I'm sure that cancer docs are going to start seeing different, types of cancer start to appear. I'm sure there's different kinds of autoimmune disorders that are starting to appear that people will say, I wonder what that's all about. Right? Go back to the 1930s when new medications were given to the population. So when you see people have responses to those things, and it's like we're at the same kind of space now with electromagnetics, because our information age is going linear. So what we did with the Aries Tech, was just the simple test was to, have a person sit there, measure their brain for a couple of minutes, right? And then stop the measurement and then put the phone up to the head and then expose them to the phone for X amount of time. Then stop the exposure and then measure their brain again and do a comparison between the two. Now I'm looking at the pure numbers here, and I just want to see, did these power levels in the brain change? And in almost every test we've done, the power levels have changed. And that's fascinating to me, because the EEG, or the electroencephalograph, when we're measuring the brain, is very stable. And when we take a 10-minute recording of your brain, we have a very high reliability, very high validity. What we're measuring is really what we're measuring. And if there's, normally it's like kind of like measuring the idle of a car. You start it up, you listen to that idle. Barring anything else wrong with the car, you're going to get a certain kind of idle. Right? Well, if something has the ability to change that idling speed in just minutes, that's something you want to pay attention to. And that got my attention. But we're definitely seeing changes in the brain that are not by accident. It's not by error. We're also seeing change in the heart. And that's really fascinating to me, because when you're in sympathetic activation, you're on the ready. You're ready to go, right? Parasympathetic, laying in the hammock. And we're seeing changes in the autonomic nervous system in minutes when a person is exposed to EMF. And then when they get Aries Tech, all of a sudden that shifts and changes, again, in minutes. Now, normally when you get sympathetically activated, you don't come down that easy, right? Fight or flight just doesn't go away. And physiologically, when you start to measure that in the blood, you're going to see, those chemicals in the blood just don't magically go away quickly. It takes a little bit of time for them to burn off. And when we start to see stuff in minutes like that, then something else is happening. And, that reminds me of just biology rests on the foundation of energy. Change the energy, you change the biology. The way you think, that can manifest in different things, right? And so I think that is something we need to pay attention to here.
No, that was good. I always tease him because when we first found him, I was just trying to replicate studies that we had already done. We had done a ton of clinical peer-reviewed stuff, brain scans, and I was like, how do you do brain scans? Like, I had to learn, figure it out, find my way to him, and I was like, so tell me, you're a musician, that's cool, whatever, and then, but you're also the guy that builds the hardware, the software, and then you're also the doctor? I had to put all that together, and I was like, it was such a unique combination. And later we were doing this, we were having a conversation, it was with Ben Greenfield, and we were talking about music and the waves. And I was like, his ability to then articulate this invisible thing in the form of music and musical waves, because the wave theory of music is similar, or if not the same, of the EMF, and the way that they propagate and they diffract and all that kind of stuff. So when he started explaining it in that way, I was like, that's such a unique combination of skills. I'm like, where did he come from, right? So I'm super grateful that he continues to want to work with us. But to be honest, the data is compelling. Every time we do this, Tim's scan, by the way, was really fascinating. And we probably could have just done the whole thing on what we learned from him, but his heart rate variability jumped from low 60s to upper 80s, which the heart rate stuff was fascinating there. But anyway, so we'll have questions for him. I do want to jump over to Chad and talk about like his own experience of doing this. What was that like? What'd you learn?
Well, the most important thing is I found out that I had a brain. So I wanted to make sure that was still there. But no, really. So I'm Chad Fincham, NASCAR driver. I've been racing in NASCAR for a number of years. And in NASCAR, everything on that race car is data driven, all the way down to like, is the temperature dropping just a couple degrees? Are we getting more humidity? Is one end of the track, do we have a cloud casting on the surface of the racetrack and cooling down, the upper groove into turn one? So all these things, I'm communicating with the team. We have spotters up on our spotter stand, which is usually on the roof of the racetrack. So I say all that to say there's constant data in our car. And I have a crew chief and a full team back in the pits that's evaluating this data when I'm racing. And we're using this data and compiling it to figure out how do we make this race car faster. In racing, a tenth of a second is life or death. We're measuring thousands of seconds and hundreds of seconds. That's important to us. When we find something on that race car that can improve the speed by even a thousandth of a second, we're all high-fiving each other in the garage area like, we found something. For me, incorporating Aries, one of the first things that I noticed was sleep. So I was waking up pretty consistently 3 or 4 times a night for years and never even thought nothing about it. I mean, I felt pretty normal the next day, at least to my standards. And, I met Josh at a race in Miami last year in the fall, and he hooked me up with a device. And I'm telling you, the sleep that I got that night, I can't explain how much better it was. I think I woke up maybe one time, and it was just to go to the bathroom where I had hydrated, because in the race cars, there's no AC, so you're battling crazy temperatures, 130, 140 degrees for hours on end, so we're pounding our hydration. And I remember waking up like, man, I feel ready to tackle today. Like I feel good. And then once I got away from that device and I went back home and I slept, and I was like, man, it was a measurable difference. And so that was probably the first thing that I noticed. And then later, with my relationship with Josh and Aries, I got to meet Dr. Dogris, and we done a brain scan. And what was fascinating about the brain scan was the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Essentially, I was stuck in fight or flight. Just wide open. I was wired, which we did the brain scan on race weekend leading up to our practices. So I was pretty jacked up, ready to go. And so what was fascinating to me was not only did the protection on the device from Aries provide an improvement over not using it, I improved over baseline. And, in that race car, like we were talking about earlier, I wear this Whoop inside the car, and I can measure pretty much all these different metrics in my body and what's going on. And, in that 4.5 hour stint that I was racing, my average heart rate was probably 150 beats. And what's crazy is, by improving over baseline and kind of balancing out that sympathetic and parasympathetic, I'm able to not lose any focus, but be calmer. Like you said, when you're stuck in fight or flight, that was the definition of anxiety, basically. The way, after my brain scan, the results, you had said it best. You said you're basically like, that's anxiety. And, you don't think about it, because as an athlete, you're just like, well, I'm just focused. It's not anxiety. I'm not nervous. I'm not worried about anything. I'm just on edge. I'm ready for anything. But by raising and balancing that out, it helps bring a sense of calmness in you to where you can essentially focus more. So, like I said, it's kind of like a tool in the toolbox that it gives me and my team that I hope nobody else in the garage has right now, but I'm sure it's coming. It's really cool stuff. It's cool to see the data, and apart from the data, the data basically just proved what I was already feeling from the sleep. That was, and I'll take that to my grave. I mean, it was instant gratification for me.
I want to say something about that, because your heart was all trigger, right? NASCAR driver, you're ready to go, and the problem is that if you don't have enough parasympathetic activation, then you're not going to correct for errors, and you're going to be more prone to make errors. So, some people came to me and said, well, did that slow them down? Nope. It's going to make you, you're going to be just as fast as you've always been. But what's going to happen here is you're also going to have time. The brain is capable of doing error checking in real time. So my guess is that it probably made you sharper.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a fighter, but I would imagine if you're trying to fight mad versus fighting focused, you're going to do a lot better if you're fighting focused. You're not taking away any of your, ambition, but it's just that balancing act allows you to just stay focused but still on edge.
Nice. It was fun to actually watch Chad because I think you're going to qualifiers, like from the test to qualifiers. You could see just his demeanor. He was cool. He was calm. He was focused. You just kind of felt the energy. And when you're around athletes, and all you guys are athletes or been around athletes, you know what that's like. You know when it's game time. You know when they're locked in. You know when something big's happening in their world, because you felt that. You did feel that with him. So it was really interesting to get that data at that point. It reminds me of RJ before the Canada versus US basketball game. He was similar, where you kept making that comment like he was ready to go, but also not being able to get out to relax. Like he was locked when he shouldn't have been. Like he should have been relaxed. And so that phone antagonizing that mechanism kept him locked in when he needed to be relaxed. So that was really interesting. So I want to shift over to Duncan, who has he's always been gracious and asked lots of good questions as we started to work together. But this is his house. He takes it seriously. Yeah, he takes it seriously. But I can't thank him enough for letting us come and crash this really, really busy week. So I really appreciate Duncan for that. I also appreciate the fact that he wanted to see stuff like this. He's encouraged us to continue to send him information, and his job is to continue to find ways to improve the health of the athletes, improve performance and whatnot. And I'll let him speak to that himself. But I do really appreciate them and the ability to come have these conversations in such an amazing place like the Performance Institute. So maybe share with us kind of what goes on here. Maybe start there and what you're thinking about.
Yeah, no, thanks everybody, and welcome. I don't mean get out. Welcome to the PI, and hopefully everyone's enjoying the environment at least. It's a busy week for us. Obviously, it's International Fight Week. It's the busiest week of our year, with multiple events going on this week. Anchored by the pay-per-view on Saturday night. So, all hands to deck this week. The Performance Institute, as I explain it, is kind of the service infrastructure for the greater UFC. The UFC is a traveling circus that sells tickets to shows around the world, and then it moves on to the next one. And prior to 2017, it didn't have any type of support infrastructure for a global roster of what is now 720 fighters around the world. About 54% of that roster live in the territory of the US, and everyone else is kind of scattered around the place. So, we deliver all kind of those auxiliary services, from sports science to strength and conditioning, medicine, nutrition, etc., that you'd expect for any world-class athlete in this day and age. And for me, I always talk about hardware and software. I think, our software is our expertise and our knowledge, and, people like the doc over here, we've got to draw on that expertise, but we've also got a hardware conversation, and that starts with our facility and our capabilities here. We want to drive as many subconscious performance behaviors as we can, and something like Aries is a natural fit. Why wouldn't you, right? It takes nothing. It takes nothing to do. And let me tell you, the placebo effect in the recovery space is more real than anywhere else in the whole of performance science, right? So that's not to say that this is a placebo. But I think in terms of when you watch the video roll and you see some of our fighters talking about, how the data made them feel, what they were seeing, that was a light bulb moment when you talk to Chad and what he's experiencing with sleep and things like that. You start to realize, okay, well, why wouldn't we just introduce something like this? And I think it was the COO of Canada Basketball who was talking about invisible training. And again, that's something that we talk about here. So implementing, this screen, God forbid, all right? Right now, talk about EMF, we're all exposed to this beast, right? So, when you start to look at ecosystems, and certainly the Performance Institute, we have to start with our hardware. We have to start with the facility, the environment that we create, and the introduction of, mechanisms and barriers like Aries Tech. It was a no-brainer to me. So, I talk about the placebo, but then, coming and actually seeing it firsthand with the doc and experientially going through it, and you start to have that oh shit moment, that wow moment. You realize that there's actually something to this, and then we really became engaged with it. And there's been a lot of discussion around UFC fighters and what they're exposed to, NASCAR drivers obviously. But at the heart of, the fight or flight response, fighters are living that every single day, to the point where allostatic load becomes massive. So again, allostatic load is that management of sympathetic arousal versus downregulation, such that you have an inability to reverse that, and now you have this sympathetic tone that is just constant. So every time our athletes come onto the mats or do their job on a day-to-day basis, that is sympathetic drive maxed out. So, over a career of 10, 12 years, 15 years of doing fighting and combat activities, our athletes are just exposed to a huge amount of allostatic load that's a massive drain on their sympathetic system. The other thing to that is also our sport is a hugely oxidative sport in nature. So when you start to talk about energy systems, the glycolytic pathways that actually are a determinant of success in the sport of mixed martial arts drives huge acidosis that creates a massive oxidative stress in the body. So when you start to look at Aries and what it does in terms of being a barrier for oxidative stress, you begin to check off all these things that, wow, fighting and combat and what it does to, sympathetic arousal and the inability to activate your parasympathetic pathways because you just go, and then you overlay the actual sporting demands. You start to say, okay, this is a population that could really benefit from something like this. And again, Chad's World is a replication of that, with driving at, hundreds of miles an hour with a brick wall right next to you. I wouldn't want to do that. So, it's something which, the more I looked into it, the more I connected with the guys and, people in the room that are associated with Aries. Thank you. Like I say, hardware, let's introduce something that is a subconscious habit. It doesn't take any effort to introduce, a barrier into our respective environments and ecosystems. That's a no-brainer. And then obviously from a software perspective, engagement is something which we see as truly beneficial from a physiological and a neurological perspective. Again, there was lots of checks that kind of lined up with our athlete population. So that's how we ended up here where we're at with Aries. And, I know just listening to the testimonials, athlete testimonial firsthand is the best example of a success story. And clearly as this started to, it's now kind of expanding across word of mouth into our roster. Our athletes are starting to share the value of it. Sleep, I think Dan talked about sleep and hydration and nutrition as core foundations. The management of your central nervous system is also something that should be one of those foundational aspects of success. And the less we can actually activate the parasympathetic, the less we can actually activate the sympathetic. So if we can't take our athletes into a down-regulated state, their ability to become super activated when they do need to go into the octagon on Saturday evening actually becomes less and less and less, and it becomes this white noise like a fridge humming in the corner. So yeah, all of those things have come together to make Aries a really important part of what we're doing here in the Performance Institute, and we're excited to see where the science and technology goes moving forwards.
Oh, that's amazing. Like these, I buy the smart guys, so I feel like I'm the guy that has to close this. But I appreciate that, and actually, what he said is really interesting. So I'm gonna try to decode some of that for us that don't speak the language as well, but
it's only English.
Yeah. But he has an accent too, so he sounds smart. I mean, there's so many things I'm dealing with up here. I'm activated, But I was gonna say, when I look at the PI, you're really, there's all these different instruments here that are designed to actually stress the nervous system to then help the nervous system recover. I mean, that's what they're doing here. Is that fair to say? Like, you've got your hot cold therapy, you're lifting weight. All these things are about training your nervous system to be adaptive, resilient, responsive when you need it to be. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, as I say, the sport of mixed martial arts demands that. We have to take our athletes to some very challenging places, and we've got to expose them to stresses, not necessarily EMF, but stresses physiologically and psychologically that are going to prepare them for competition. But the other side of that, and I'm sure some of you walked through kind of the lounge when you came in, you saw the layback chairs, the massage chairs. We're also massively engaged in having a recognition of the importance of the down regulation piece, which I'm sure is where you were going. Yeah. In as much as that's as important as the stresses. I'm a huge believer in you have to earn the right to recover. So we've got to go into some of those stressful situations, and like I say, when you start to drive oxidative stress and the metabolic demands alongside psychological demand, you're putting your body under a lot of stress. So we've got to be strategic as well around the other side of that narrative, the other side of that conversation, which is parasympathetic and recovery.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was saying. It's like it's both parts of it, and you're doing all of that here. And I think that's my point of, like, to really simplify what is the Performance Institute. It is those two things. It's really like, how do we build them up, but also help them come back down, and so that they can actually deal with the rigors of the sport, in and out of the octagon. So, I kind of wanted to wrap it up and go back to what I originally started with. Is this isn't about the cell phone or demonizing technology. As a matter of fact, if we got rid of all the technology. And in our studies, we've done this, because when you're doing more clinical stuff, you have to control the variables. So it's not like we're just in a random room when we're testing and we're passing it off as science. We're actually in a clean room, which means we can control and measure the amount of EMF that's in that room. And then we're introducing a specific frequencies or specific range of frequencies, and then we're testing the body's response to that. And so in the absence of these man-made frequencies, the body still tunes. Aries still is effective at having a tuning effect with the body. You mentioned the heart being really powerful from an electromagnetic field standpoint, and it is enough to still tune. So when we think about why UFC, why the Performance Institute, it provides us the platform to help people understand the electromagnetic environment and to be more thoughtful and proactive in what they're doing. And you saw from all of these tests that we just showed you, and we have many, many more. I don't know how much data we've collected to this point with the number of scans we've done from both athletes and just kind of us normies, but we've got a lot. And so the results are very similar across the board. Athletes seem to be hypersensitive in a lot of ways, with shorter exposure times and shorter recovery times. So that's been really interesting. But to think about a new baseline, everybody created a new baseline when they were using Aries. It wasn't where they were, it was actually better. It was more balanced, it was more stable, it was more in control. And so when you think about everyday life and you're thinking about, how do I design the optimal environment? Well, we're already doing that. I mean, you think about in your apartment, you've got plants, or you've got an air filter, you've got a water filter, you've got, you're controlling the air so that you sleep better at night. You're got blackout, you do all these things to control your environment. And Aries is one of those things that, in my opinion, when you look at the data, if everyone could solve the problems that we just showed and reset their baseline or create a new baseline, everybody would do it. If we could do a brain scan for everybody would do it. And I think that's where this partnership was really focused, is like, how do we use elite level athletes at an elite institution to help us tell that story? And so far, we're still early, in my opinion, because we've taken some work. We got to get Duncan excited about what we got going on, and he's got a whole other thing to operate, and we're slowly getting there. But I'm super stoked on the UFC allowing us to tell this story, and that's why they're such a good partner. We had opportunities with other pro sports, but it was always with constraints. And one thing, with the UFC was, they're just like, we want to win. We want to partner with the best. We're not afraid to go against the grain, and that's what got the UFC here to where they are today, and that was just a very good alignment for us. And so we're really excited and grateful for the opportunity to tell our story, to share the platform with them that they provided, and to do this. So I'd love to get some questions. I don't know how much time we have. I want to be mindful of that, because they'll kick us right out of here.
So we've got some questions. We got questions here.
So what does the effect like on adults? What's it like on children or household stuff?
I'll tell you from our standpoint, we know in some of the work we've done with other doctors, not necessarily Dr. Dogris, the child's biology and maybe that's not the right word, but they're developing, and so there's definitely a sensitivity there that's different than an adult who's already developed, and we also see this. What's really interesting is I would say people that are probably over the age of 45 respond differently than the people that I would say under 45. And I'm giving a range there that I can't concretely like say, yeah, that's the age. But it does seem to align with people that developed with a mass amount of technology in their world and they were able to fully develop without it versus those who have always had it. And that's something that it's an observation that we've had now. And we've done this not just with him, but in our own trials. We've probably got hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 samples now of age ranges and whatnot. So it's been really interesting to see that. But I'll maybe let you speak to what a child would look like.
You know, now you're going to get me started. My biggest concern right now is screens with kids. Right, you know, the computers, iPads, and you go to school, you see there's a lot of exposure to it, and their little brains are forming. We already know that dopamine takes a hit, and it can impact you in a way that can impact your mood, your focus, concentration. And right now, the prevalence rate for ADHD in the United States is higher, and it's higher than it's ever been. And now the National Institute is talking about, what's the amount of time that a child should be exposed to these stimulation devices, and this is part of our world, right? You're not going to get away from it. You have to know how to use it. But right now, the maximum, all the way up to, they're saying like little kids shouldn't get a cell phone until they're 16. And that's for a reason, because neurotransmitters are impacted at a younger age. And so, I'm all about creating environments that are healthy and as low impact as possible so as to mitigate these kinds of effects. It's a serious concern.
Yeah, one thing I would say that he and I have had a discussion with, because his work as a psychologist, I'm always, because I see this data, and one thing that we see, and I would say that one of the number one things that I think is reported from our customers is mood regulation and the ability to control and regulate mood in a different way. And that's been a curiosity of mine to like ask more questions. Is it the physiological thing that's happening with the chronic exposure, or is it the psychological?
It's both.
And he always says it's both. And I'm always like, well, which comes first, right? Like, but you can see as one's eroding, the other one's eroding. It becomes a flywheel in the wrong direction. And I find that really interesting from a young person standpoint. Like I said, other work that we've done with doctors that talk about young people, it is really about just the developmental aspect of the body and how it works and how cells are formed and the life cycle of all those different things, tissue and things like that, and how your body is electric and it's working that way. And so your body's trying to translate these signals because it's how it's communicating through these electric fields, and it can't process and translate that. So it's always has some level of stress. And so when you're developing with that some level of stress all the time, things happen. And that's what we've talked with other doctors about. So to be able to solve that though, like with a simple solution, I think that's my point of like, how do we be thoughtful about our environment? And cars are really interesting when you travel, airplanes, like I was walking around with this little EMF reader for a long time, and it actually was a personal one that would measure your cumulative exposure.
Yeah, and the other thing we're looking at is genetic responses. What's happening over the generations. You start with people that were born in the 60s, right? And EMF exposures were markedly lower. And you go one cohort, two cohorts, three cohorts in, right? And all of a sudden sensitivity to these energies are, they're way more sensitive. And so you could take a person that's older, expose them to something that bounces off them, right? But you take somebody that's 3 generations in, all of a sudden they have a sensitivity to it that nobody really understands. And I think what's happening here is our bodies are starting to adapt. The brain is an adaptive mechanism. It'll adapt to environments all around you. And so, hit it with enough stuff and it's going to stop and go, oh, that's what you want me to do? Okay, I'll do that. Right? And that's not necessarily going to be good. That's an ongoing question.
Yeah.
In regards to just talk to me like a kindergartner, how does your product actually work?
Good question. So what's really interesting about Aries product, and I always go back to it's a 30-year project that's been a combined effort with probably pretty close to 200 different researchers and scientists that have contributed to the work. It was originally a foundation, and the goal and the mission was really originally around trying to find ways to kind of optimize the body's own field and kind of the connection between the earth and a lot of different like energy manipulation to promote wellness. And so, or healing or other things. And a lot of people even know this, but there are a lot of FDA clear devices that have frequencies that actually stimulate tissue for wound healing and bone growth. Those have been approved for a long time. PEMF mats are common. I don't know if you guys use those here, but again, frequencies that are controlled to create a positive effect. And so what our team did over the years was really perfect the geometry of how do we take the ambient energy that's around us that's being produced and then structure it in a way that creates a field that is stable, coherent, that your body can tune itself to. And so when you understand wave theory and you understand like tuning forks, for example, you can create a resonant effect that then all the other waves then tune themselves to. And that's essentially like a terrible way to explain it, but also an easy way to understand it. And so what's happening is the core of it is a silicon resonator chip, which is essentially a semiconductor. And so what a semiconductor is, or what silicon does, is it's a highly conductive material that can also shape energy, can code energy, it can do all these different things to energy. So it's a way to manipulate it. And so what we've done, if you actually can look in the light and you can kind of move it around, you'll see there's over 1 million different fractal etchings within that chip. And those are specific geometry that when the EMF interacts with it, it absorbs it in a way that it then re-emits a new field, which we call a biotropic field, which is a stable, coherent field that has specific range, a really broad range of frequencies. When you understand fractal geometry, which is a whole other thing to discuss, which we won't, but it's the ability to produce wide or broad ranges of frequencies in a very small space. It's what cell phone antennas use. It's what there's a fractal geometry that's used to transmit and receive frequencies. And so we use a similar concept with specific geometry that then creates these different fields, right? And so again, very basic. I'm not a physicist, but I spend a lot of time with them and try to read all the literature I possibly can to understand it. So, but that gives you kind of a general idea. Is it's interacting with the field. It's creating a new stable field that then the things around it tune itself to, while also redistributing the energy. And so they're kind of both a supportive mechanism to it, but then also like the protective element to it. So a lot of people think of it as like EMF protection. And I think when you look at the data, I think there's a very good argument to suggest that it's actually more supportive than it is protective. You're seeing more, that's why I think the baseline is what you're seeing improvements there. And I think if you were to get my R&D team together, they'd probably argue this, which one's more powerful. As far as the target center and in our relationship with the Timberwolves, it's kind of interesting because I think the oldest, next to Madison Square Garden, the oldest facility in the NBA. And they've done a pretty good job of updating the infrastructure in there, but it's also fairly dated. But when you walk around, you can actually see the giant, I won't say the name of the telecommunications company, but you'll see their 5 millimeter or 5G millimeter wave antennas, and they're not even shy about it. They're like, you can touch them as you're walking through, and they're like every 3 rafters around that facility. And so as an initial starting point with them was to really integrate the product in those points. and all the access points and all the repeaters and things like that. We've done some stuff in the media room, the locker room, and today the draft room with the Timberwolves, which we're super stoked on for the NBA draft. But that's kind of a starting point. We have more work to do. It's a little difficult to do sometimes during the season. So now that the off season started, we have some more work to do with them. We're really stoked on. As far as your house, my point of view is next to the bed, next to all the hot points, which would be like your electrical panel, which is oftentimes connected to LTE or something like that. A lot of people don't know that. Your routers, all those your obvious spots. If you're in an older home, you'd be surprised though at the wiring that also emits a fair amount of EMF because it's not shielded like the coating is. Like our building codes today are better and they're way more shielded. And if you have ever met somebody that has electro hypersensitivity, they have to be very thoughtful about where they're spending time because they're so sensitive to wiring, which is interesting, right? Like you never think about that because you're not sensitive. But that would be another thing to think about too, is like where your home is, right? Especially if you're in a big city and you're like in New York and you got towers and you got 5G towers on top of your building. That's another thing that we hear a ton of things about, but just being thoughtful about what's around you. Like it's pretty easy. Our larger devices are way more sensitive, so they can broadcast and emit a field at a bigger range. But that's generally, how I would approach it.
When I thought about using areas, I thought more about the recovery aspect. All of them, recovery and performance, they kind of go hand in hand, right? Because the better you can recover, the better you can perform. But I thought it as a recovery aspect as far as the brain, because Dr. Duncan knows, and with all of the fighters, whenever you get hit over a certain amount of times, you see these guys go into the gym, they don't talk the same, their speech slurs. That's besides the fact. But the thing I was curious about was I saw the test you guys did with Corey, and you talked about reaction time. Have you done more thorough tests on that? And if you have, like, what are the results as far as that?
So reaction time seems to improve. You get faster, which is interesting. When you're in a sympathetic activated state, again, like I said earlier, you can be prone to error because you're all trigger. You have to have a balance between the two, and I think recovery is a big deal. I'm a hardware guy myself, and so, we look at, in the brain, sympathetic activation happens in the anterior cingulate. Parasympathetic is in the posterior cingulate, and those two have to switch on and off, okay? And what happens is that if you get locked in one, then you don't go into parasympathetic recovery, and your body doesn't gear down to get rid of the stuff it needs to get rid of. It doesn't do its house cleaning the way it's supposed to. And reaction time gets faster as compared to baseline. That's what we've been seeing. Now, we haven't run bigger studies, which we're talking about now, but I would anticipate that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, so the reaction time is really interesting, and that's been a spot of interest. It's a more complex, longer test, but we really like it because the amount of data that's collected in it is a lot. So there's a lot of things to deconstruct once you to really understand what's going on. But that would be one that'd be fun to do with Markel because he asked the question. So let's put him to the test. But any other questions, Bobby?
I live in an old house in an old city with a lot of Wi-Fi and speakers and touch points. My office is right next to some obscene 5G towers. But when I look online and search around for like EMF and then kind of like insulate myself from 5G and trying to get more into the parasympathetic, a lot of what comes back is like, I guess competitors to Aries, clothing and t-shirts or stickers you put on your phone to claim to block EMF. Which seems kind of fishy to me because if it blocked it, would your phone even work? But help me understand sort of what's going on with that.
That's a good question, and it's something that we work really hard on because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about competitors because I know how hard it is for us to make the invisible visible. And when we can demonstrate this with virtually anybody in this room and we can show you the effect and that it's working, I'm surprised that more people aren't doing that, because it's difficult to do, but it's also easy to do. Meaning, like, it's not like Dr. Dogris is the only person in the world that does this, and he doesn't work for us. So anyone could call him that has the product if they wanted to demonstrate that that worked. And so I just don't know enough about other people. But what I can say about the blocking stuff is, you're right. If it was truly blocking, your phone wouldn't work. And because that's how your phone works. It's how data is transmitted, is through these energies being transferred back and forth. And if you blocked it, your phone wouldn't work. And that's how you know if the blocking technology would actually work. When we worked with this doctor out of Denver, and she has a great story. She's an MD, and she thinks a lot about environmental health. And because she's hypersensitive for different things, and she works with a lot of patients that are hypersensitive, she shared this experience with us where, because of her hypersensitivity, and this was when she was still dealing with a lot of health problems, I think it was mold. She developed something that just worse is now was exposure to mold. Like, you would probably know what that means more than I do, but she became very hypersensitive. So she shares this story of where she had to fly to, I want to say, Australia from Denver, a really long flight. And she bought this like full-on suit because airports are like toxic, like EMF. There's just so much of it, right? And if you have a little EMF reader, it's fun to like walk by the security station, TSA, and it's like it just lights up. And then when you're on the airplane, it lights up. So she knows this, obviously. So she wears this suit, and she tells us a story where she literally thought her skin was on fire. And the reason being is when you understand the physics, your body's conducting. It doesn't matter if it's, a small patch of your skin. Your whole body then is conducting and moving this stuff through. And so when you wrap yourself in that, or you create an environment in that both things are true. It's going to keep things out, but it's also going to keep things in. And if it's truly blocking, it's actually going to probably amplify the effect in a lot of ways. Just again, understanding wave theory. If you're in a gymnasium with bad acoustics, that wave is bouncing all around because there's no way for it to be absorbed or dissipate. And so the same thing is true with EMF. So the blocking stuff, like I said, if you put a hat on that's supposed to protect your brain, well, what's happening in the rest of your body? And now you have a lid on your brain, right? It makes sense, right? Or like, Andrew Huberman did that whole podcast around the effect of EMF on testosterone and the male reproductive system, the female reproductive system, breast tissue, and the same thing's true. Like, if you want to wear the underwear to block that, well, you're actually now just trapping and putting a container now, right, around your stuff. And so the point is like, I don't think that's effective. It's not scalable. It's not realistic to think that way either. And so for me, I'm not really I don't really encourage people to move that direction, because it's the ability to understand frequencies and waves and how that works and how they propagate. You can't really defend yourself against it with a barrier, not effectively. And as a matter of fact, you introduce the potential for more harm. I don't know if you want to add to that as an actual scientist.
Yeah, when people say I have an EMF blocker, it's like, well, unless you're wearing it over your entire body, it's probably not going to be effective. And the majority of the ones I've tested didn't pass muster. So the way I see this device is it's almost like having an air filter that is running in your room, that's cleaning the air and removing harmful elements from the air. And it's capable of being able to do that on its own. Now, depending on what's around you and how much around you, we're going to see, what gets mitigated. But it's not a blocker. It's going to change those waveforms in such a way so that they're not going to be harmful to your body or reduce the amount of harm to your body. You keep on getting pelted with square waves, that's going to hurt you. But if this thing can diffract those things, then the benefit is obvious.
Okay, I don't give me more time. I think that's all it. But I appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate the questions. Thanks for sticking with us. And again, Duncan, thank you for letting us hang out. Chad traveled all the way from Tennessee. And by car, as you'd expect. He made a lot of stops.
Really fast.
A lot of people to see on his way here, so we appreciate him making the trip out here. But again, thank you.